Hello and a vibrant welcome to all of you that tuning in. I'm Dorleta Gonzalez and it's my absolutely pleasure to guide you to today's adventure in the DG.Talks show. Here we don't just have conversations, we create connections with some of the most fascinating and authentic voices out there. Each of our guests brings a unique perspective, a story that deserves to be heard, and ideas that inspire actions. So together, we are not doing dialogue only, we are building bridges, fostering understanding and contributing to the world that's a little bit more connected, a little bit more informed, and a lot more inspired. So get ready to this intriguing, enlightening, and maybe even transformation as we embark this journey of discovering together with a very special guest. This guest is an amazing lady called Claire, and please forgive me if I mispronounce it wrong, Aghassipour. Yeah.
Excellent.
And so who is Claire? A little bit about Claire. Well, drawing on her personal background in six diverse cultures and her IT tenure in global corporations, Claire empowers international teams through her role as an intercultural competence and personal leadership trainer. As an award winner of public speaking, storytelling herself, and that I know very good, she's an amazing storyteller, Claire takes great pleasure in providing a stage for inspirational speakers. She has done so as the organizer of personal leadership events through her company, DG.Talks Productions, as activities coordinator on the board of the Society of Intercultural Education, training and research for theater in Netherlands, and by chairing Toastmasters international conferences. She has used her multicultural experience in writing her book called Cross-Cultural Misunderstanding, which is due out any day. I hope I have not forget anything because Claire has a huge amount of knowledge and experience, and we are going to actually know all about that. So welcome, Claire, to the DG.Talks show.
Thank you, Dorleta. Nice to be here.
Thank you. I have a very interesting question because looking at this completely stand from, you came from IT and you moved as a trainer in intercultural competence and personal leadership. Why do you find intercultural competence important?
Oh, that's easy, Dorleta, because, we're all human beings, and human beings are social beings. And unless we know the social context in which we're operating, it's going to be very difficult to thrive and to live effectively in the different cultures. And it's not only where the cultures that we live in, but the cultures that the people we work in come from or live in. And we need, knowing all of that is very important. I mean, I would kind of compare it to, how many of you here play the card game Rummy? How many of you are familiar with Rummy? A card game, doesn't matter. So I used to play Rummy with my cousins as I was growing up. And then I went to England, and one day we're sitting there with my friend and we said, oh, let's play Rummy. So we got out the cards and we dished them out and we start playing. And within like a minute, it was like, what are you doing? You can't do that. What do you mean I can't do that? Of course I can do that. No, those aren't the rules. Yes, they are. That's how we play them. Oh, that's it. And it went back and forth until we realized that Obviously, her rummy wasn't exactly my rummy. Same card, same name, everything, but our rules were different. So being, learning about different cultures is a little bit like that, because if you don't know the rules, then you waste time at the beginning trying to understand what the other people are, how they're acting, why they're acting, what their values are, how to talk to them, what you're supposed to do and not. And that kind of time can really be saved if we know up front a little bit about culture.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I can see it and I feel it. And I believe most of us, we have had that kind of experience, not with Romy, but very similar ones. So what experiences do you bring to your work as an intercultural trainer?
Well, let's just say when we talk about experiences, we're usually talking about, hey, what's that piece of paper that you've got? So I did in the not too distant past, well, maybe a long time ago, I did study international relations, and I worked as a journalist. That was in Israel. And just recently, I did study intercultural competence. So, that's on the study part. But to be honest, I would probably say that my biggest teacher has been my life. And let me just, instead of telling you about that, let me just show you something that's going to be kind of a double, that will help us look at both intercultural models. Can you see my screen clearly?
I can.
Yeah, okay. Well, lots of cultural anthropologists have tried to define culture, to create methods in which they can compartmentalize culture in certain ways so that they can understand it better. They can compare it with each other better. And one of them in the 1990s was Lewis. And this is the Lewis model. And Lewis said, he said, well, generally, let's look at three different extremes of behavior. If you look down here at the left corner, you've got the linear actives, he calls them. They're blue. And the blue people are the ones who are like completely about being precise and factual, and processes and structure. And basically, you'd think of Swiss bankers or even clockmakers in that kind of area. And if you look on the top here, he calls them multi-active, and it's red. And just as the color says, this is like fiery people, people who are emotional, people who are spontaneous, people who might go from one thing to another. They might interrupt you when they're talking. It's just quite kind of bubbly, active types of cultures. And then if you go all the way down to the right corner, he calls them the reactive cultures. And those are the more calm cultures. One with nature, quiet, not out there, not looking for confrontation, being quiet. So I would say, I would call that, for example, Dalai Lama type of cultures. And what he's tried to do is he's tried to place various countries that he researched, and he had about 200,000 interviews, and with executives for the most part. And he's tried to place these countries along these lines. So here's where my life experience comes in, so you can kind of see how mixed up I am. So this here is Saudi Arabia and the Arab countries, and my parents were Iraqis, and they moved to Iran, which is here, Bulgaria, Turkey, and Iran. And I was born in Iran and raised there. But while there, I actually went to an international American school. So I was actually, kind of indoctrinated more in this kind of thinking down here. And after school, I then went to Israel, which is then up here. And I think it's in between the red and the blue because they're high tech. The high tech nature of the country is very blue, but their temperament is rather red. So then I went there. And so you're kind of reprogramming your cultural behavior. And then I went over to the UK, which is down here. And in England, I would say this is like a huge, huge jump from a cultural point of view, because these are people who are very straightforward. They tell you as it is. They're quite boisterous and loud, and then you come here to the UK, and it's people are very kind of, well, Ian knows, quite quiet and not in your face and give me all the space you can in the world, right, Ian? Okay. David, where are you from, by the way? You're muted.
I'm from muted. No, I'm from England.
You're also from England. Oh,
And I
well.
live in Spain.
Excellent. Right.
So no one in this group is actually in the same places where they were born. Interesting.
No, exactly, which is fantastic. So we all know what's going to come in this conversation. So yeah, so that was the UK, and here I met my husband, who's very, very English, and he wanted to come to Holland, and Holland is here, Netherlands, right there. So again, it was a jump, and although you can see it's very close, effectively in how it's mapped, these two countries, but again, a huge difference, because the Dutch are, for example, extremely direct in how they speak to you, whereas the English are not. In England, again, you would all know you'd have to say sorry 5 times. So here I am. So I've had experience of more or less all of this section of the world in temperament and in culture and in kind of being able to kind of a little bit understand where people are coming from. And I haven't had any experience with this part of the world, with the quieter, more peaceful types in in Asia. And maybe that's going to be my next move, because my nephew just married a Cambodian. So who knows? Maybe I can go and understand how those cultures fit together. So so I've taken stories from all of these all of these experiences, and of course everything with cultural cross-cultural models, and I've turned that into a book of cross-cultural insights and cross-cultural stories. So yeah, that will hopefully come out in the next few days.
That is such an amazing storytelling of all over the place. But please tell me more about your book, please.
My book. Let me show you. Let me see if there we go. That's the book. Cross-cultural, hopefully understanding and not misunderstanding. And I like to think that the more we know about people, the more we understand people's cultures, we can stop not trusting them because they're not us, and we can begin to understand them more, and we can even begin to like them and trust them. So the book was actually I've put it together in two sections. The first part is more about cultural values and behavior and communication styles. And, when we talk about communication styles, of course, that affects all sorts of things, like marketing, for example. How do you market to people? How do you give feedback to people? How do you listen to people so that you know what their message really is, whether they're telling you in clear words or not telling you in clear words? So all of that kind of comes into that first part of the book. And the second part of the book is about when cultures meet. So there I'm covering what I think probably we all know about. I don't know about Ife, but the rest of us have moved countries. So it's like kind of the expats experience, and it's about identity. What happens to your identity when you move from country to country? What happens to your children's identities when you move from country to country? What is multiculturalism? What happens when there's a my people, your people kind of conflict? So so that's kind of and virtual teams working across. So that's kind of where the second part of the book is about.
I fully connect with that because I believe most of us, as you heard, two British gentlemen that live in Spain and a lady that has two family names that they are not actually from the same country. So you can imagine we all can relate to that. But how that, in your experience, for the experience that you have had so far, how that can be influencing how can impact the business? What are the most important cultural differences that impact our business? Because nowadays, I believe it's everywhere. So in your experience, what it is the most important cultural differences?
So before we go into what would impact business, let's just take a quick look and see what we're talking about when we're talking about culture, right? And just before I go into it, how many of you here are already into culture and intercultural competence?
Yeah, a lot of that.
A lot of that, David. Yes. Yep. I certainly heard you last time. And Ian, what about you? What are your focus points?
I just try to get on with everybody.
Give them a
Aren't
nice
we
cup
all,
of
aren't we
tea.
all
Ian.
doing
Nice
that?
cup of tea.
Yeah, it's nice cup of tea. I'll have a cup of tea. There you go. Yeah.
Hey, but I think that where you are is more sangria than cup of tea, isn't it?
Oh no, that's southern Spain.
Oh, okay. So
I'm in
all
northern,
right.
northeast.
Okay.
I have my tea.
Excellent. But what are I see your kind of your logo in the back, learning clubs, is it?
Yes.
So what do you, just for me to get a feeling, what kind of learning do you work with?
I run what I describe as personal development accelerators, which are a form of self-managed learning and coaching.
Okay, excellent, because that's also part of what I do. But I take it I'm guessing culture isn't exactly one of your focus points. It's more personal leadership, or
It's the focus actually is more to do with motivation.
okay.
People are very reluctant to get out of their comfort zones.
Yeah.
And so whether it's a intercultural comfort zone a cultural comfort zone or a psychological comfort zone or whatever, then it's encouraging, persuading, threatening people to get out of their comfort zone and do something that's going to help them get onwards and upwards.
Excellent. That's wonderful. That's what we all need, isn't it?
I think from the UK, gentleman. That's supposed to be passive.
Okay, so let's look at what we're talking about. Culture. Yeah. So obviously, we're all born with this personality, right? There's this little baby who's born, and we are who we are. And when all is said and done, and we've kind of peeled off all those layers of culture and all those layers of everything else, whether we get along or not has a lot to do with personality. However, from the minute we're born, we have people around us who are telling us, talk this way, act this way, dress this way, and hold your fork this way, hold your chopsticks that way, that kind of thing. And that's the That's the behavior that we're taught almost immediately. Then as we get a little bit older, people start telling us, well, the reason why you need to do this is because of the values that we have. So it's polite, for example, in Holland, you'll put a child into a party and say, be polite, go around, look at everybody in their eye, shake their hand, and say your name. And so you'll have Dutch people going around the room, 30 people all around the circle going, hello, I'm Claire, hello, I'm Claire, hello, I'm Claire, hello, I'm Claire. And it'll just kind of go on 30 times. But if you come from another culture, you might say, be polite, do not look anybody in the eye, right? So the value is there. The value of being polite, the value of being respectful. In one culture, you might say, respect your father, obey him. In another culture, you would say, respect your father, be on time. Respect is the value, but what behavior does it drive? So it's kind of important to understand that the same value can drive different behaviors. And then we've got what I'm calling here history. But history is pretty much that kind of deep-rooted sense of who we belong to and why. So who are our historical heroes? Who are our friends? Who are our enemies? Who did good to us? Who did bad to us? And these are stories that one begins to hear from childhood onwards. And little bit by little bit, this whole behavior, values, history thing goes, it kind of goes into our mental makeup. And before you know it, we're looking at the world through glasses, through this filter of all of our cultural mental programming. Would anybody agree with that or disagree with that at this point? Do you see yourselves going through life with some sort of a cultural filter that you were brought up with?
Yeah, I try to ignore it, or I lay it on thick, depending on who I'm with.
Yeah, so you choose when to pick what, right?
Oh yeah, I can switch and jump about, but I can certainly be extremely British and Northern, and so can Ian at the same time, and we're very good together.
Well, I like to say it's a little bit like when you go through all these different cultures, you pick different bits from every culture, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I like to think of them as clothes as your clothes in a wardrobe.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have, so you might have all these different clothes that you've collected, and you'll choose. You have one that you're really comfortable with. So you'll kind of, if it's on your Sunday or if your mask can be off, you'll go to that item of clothing. There'll be some items in your wardrobe that you'll have to wear at different occasions. And then there'll be some that as you go through life, you'll go, you know what? I really don't want that. You'll throw that out. So it's no longer a part of you. It's no longer what you want to behave as. So we've got Stephen Perry. Hi, Stephen. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Lovely. Welcome. Hi.
I'm sorry, this is the earliest I could join, unfortunately.
That's okay. We've just gotten into talking a little bit about what culture is and how it's made up of the behaviors and the values and the history that we're brought up with.
Yes.
So, Stephen, can you just briefly tell me, just so I know who's in the audience, what do you do?
I'm involved with helping organizations develop the right culture that aligns with creating an organization which is much more adaptive rather than just trying to stay and resting on the laurels. It's about how do we get continuous change and how do you develop a culture of continuous change.
Right, which is...
And I have an approach which talks about the climate at work, which is
Okay,
at the
excellent.
surface level of culture. Culture is deep-rooted and sometimes difficult to shift, but climate is something that is much more amenable. I have a saying, Climate, there's two things about climate. It's easy to change. And the other thing that's bad about it is it's easy to change. So,
Yes. That's really
uh,
excellent. I'd really like to talk to you more about that afterwards. Maybe we can connect and do so and see how you approach it. So let's see some more. Today's focus is more on intercultural culture, international culture, and
mhm.
multicultural culture. So which also affects, of course, corporate culture.
Yeah, how can
Right.
we bridge the gaps in the cultures?
Yeah. Right. So let me see. Go back. Oh, you were asking me what the most important, what I would define as being some of the most important
Cultural difference that impact the business and how we can
for business, right?
bridge the gap.
So
Because one thing is our personal, we all have our personal experience because we are here quite diverse in this audience. However, we have the same situation in at work in the business, and how does it impact? Because we
right,
react differently, I guess. So how can we actually build that bridge, build that this gap between the cultures?
yeah. So there's obviously a lot of elements of culture that are probably in their totality all relevant when we're working together, when we're living together. But particularly, your question is about business. So different. So let's look at different kind of cultural elements that play with human interaction first. So you've got things that are that different cultural anthropologists have called different things over time. But one of the things is power distance or flat culture as opposed to hierarchical cultures, and how people respond to that. There are things like how much do you do you, let's see, we've got somebody else coming in. Let's say hi to Oliver. So there's also there's how you think about rules. There is how do you, hi Oliver, welcome.
Sorry,
We're
I'm
just
late.
talking about cultural elements that are important in business.
Thank you.
So if I was to choose something from, I mean, communication, of course, is extremely important. Hospitality is something that different cultures do differently. A lot of things affect how businesses are run, and particularly how international and multicultural businesses are run. But if I were to choose just one, I would say it probably has to do with hierarchy. And let me explain why. I'll give you a story. So when I was living in England, our neighbors were an Iranian couple in their mid-30s. And his parents came over to visit. So, I went to pay my respects, and I went in, and they were drinking tea, and the parents were both smoking. And, we said our hellos. And then my friends, both him and his wife, walked out onto the balcony. Now, this was a really cold February day. And I'm like, what are they doing out in the balcony? So they came back, and, they were chatting. And I went to the kitchen. I said to her, I said, what were you guys doing in the balcony? She said, oh, my husband's dad asked him when he was a teenager, asked him not to smoke. And he's respecting him by not smoking in front of him. I said, really? Surely his father knows that he's smoking. I mean, you can see the smoke going on in the balcony. She said, oh, we all know what's going on, but we've still got to show our respect. Now, if you were kind of raised in Holland, where children right from the get-go are saying, you got to form your own opinions, you got to say what's on your mind, you're equal to your parents, you're equal to everybody else, that would seem so strange. But if you're born in a culture where hierarchy is such an important thing, and you've got to kind of obey, but you respect by obeying your parents, and then by obeying your teachers, and then by obeying your managers and the government.
And your husband.
Your husband. Okay.
Right.
But and the thing is, if you agree with them, you're doing it. But if you don't agree with them, you go out into the balcony and you smoke your cigarette out there, right? And that happens also at work. So when you're coming from a culture, we had let me just put the other sheet up as right. So
You're not in presentation mode.
now I can see that. Let me just do this. Don't you just love technology? Right. So I think we're there now. Right. So this, Oliver, you missed this. This was kind of a guy, Lewis, Richard Lewis, who was modeling different cultures based on whether they're cold and exact, or whether they're very emotional, or whether they're very reactive and calm and quiet. So when you look at hierarchy, if you come from a culture like Arab cultures, for example, where the manager is expected to know everything and to tell people what to do, and people do it. And suppose that manager, who's just used to working in that way, then comes and deals with people in Holland, which is an extremely flat society, where again, people are take decisions all. You take decisions together. You come to you agree things together. And somebody comes, and this Dutch employee will all of a sudden come and start putting their oar in about your decision and what you said and how you could do that better. Well, that kind of manager is going to be thrown off, and he's not really going to appreciate the input that's coming. And the other way is also true. So if you're, for example, a manager who's for example, raised in the Danish or the Scandinavian culture, where again, everybody's equal, everybody puts their decision and their thoughts into a decision, and you're very much hands off, and you're this kind of servant leader as opposed to the big boss. Then if you're like outsourcing work to, for example, India or somewhere where people are waiting to be told what to do and how to do it, there could be a huge mismatch, because people will just not be will not be reacting to you in the way that you're expecting them to react. So and there was another little thing with sorry, I've got a dog here who insists on constantly going in and out the room. There was I spoke to an American an American project leader who was working with Vietnam, and he called up a meeting with his team and himself, and they were sitting there, and the other team, and he said, how's things going? And you've been through a certain stage. What are the problems that you've come across? Dead silence. So he's like, well, is everything okay? Yes, fine, everything's fine. So he didn't believe it, because this was the first round. So he goes to his team leader counterpart over there, and he says, this is what they've told me. Is it right? And he said, wait a minute. So now that team leader goes to his team, and the team can now respond with the problems, because they're not talking about the American manager. They're talking to their own manager, who who's not responsible for the work they're doing. So they can give him the feedback, and then the manager can give the other manager the feedback. But this American was so frustrated as to, well, why didn't they tell me when I was sitting there? I'm like, well, you shouldn't have sat in on the meeting. They would have told your team, that kind of, it's hierarchy plays a very important role.
Absolutely. Or maybe they should have had a intercultural training before that, right? Before you're going to be working in a different place. But I would like to address something that is actually more seriously, because as we all know, lately in the last years, unfortunately, or last year and a half, we had different events in our world. We had things like wars, as we already know, which is affecting everybody. And that is causing a lot of friction between employees. And I have even experienced that the CEO was actually informing to everybody to please respect one each other, even though they come from different countries, like a Russian working with someone from, oh my God, I got blanking.
Ukraine,
exactly. And they're working together, or
yeah.
someone from, we are having a customer that is from Iraq or Iran, and they're working. So we have Palestinians together with US. So, and these are causing problems in the workforce. So what will be your advice, or what can the company do to try to avoid colleagues to be against one each other in the workforce?
Yeah, that's an important one, and it's a very tricky one. So there's the colleagues, of course, and then there's what does the company do? Does it take a stand? Does it not take a stand? There was, for example, with Russia and Ukraine, as we know, companies did not have the choice of whether, Western companies almost didn't have a choice of whether they would or would not take a stand, because everybody was being pressured to leave Russia. So, for example, I think it was August. Wait, I did have. Yeah. So, in August it was Heineken, who had started trying to pull out of Russia when the war started, and the Russians were stopping them, because obviously it's a huge organization, and a lot of its people are involved. So it stopped, but finally they came to the conclusion that they sold the whole business in Russia for $1 to a Russian company, and they lost $300,000, I think $300,000 business, which they sold over for $1. Heineken and many other companies that pulled out of Russia may or may not have wanted to do that from a business point of view. But in that atmosphere, they really didn't have a choice. So that's a company that doesn't, that's a situation where somehow society doesn't allow you to have a choice. In the conflict that's happening now between Gaza and Israel, you do have a choice. It's not like the entire West is one way or another. You've got mixed feelings, and very emotional mixed feelings about everything. And so companies do have a choice. Do they take sides? Do they not take sides? And this gentleman here, Paddy Cosgrave, so he was the CEO of a company called Web Summit. And Web Summit in November had a summit of 70,000 people, right? And in October, just after kind of the war broke out, and about a week or so after Israel went into Gaza, he issued a statement saying war crimes need to be taken account, regardless of whether a country's our ally or not. Well, so many of the people who were going to be showing up at this Web Summit event in November were either tech companies from Israel, or some one way or another large companies that were related, that favored Israel in this thing, and they pulled out. Now, this company had just survived COVID. Then they got hit by Ukraine, and now he went and said this statement, and there was another event that was going to be hit. So he had to he resigned immediately in the hope of saving the company. So that's what happens when, you know, I think, Dorletta, you've said to me in the past, don't mix business, politics, religion, and business with politics and religion, right? In an ideal world, right? In an ideal world, you want to be neutral because it's not your core business to be political. So that same question was asked to us, the board of the Society for Intercultural Education and Training. So just lately, a couple of our members said, "Are you not going to put out a statement about the Palestine-Israel war?" And so we put out a statement, and this is perhaps the sort of statement that maybe companies who just want to who don't want to bring politics into their lives, something like this. So we said something that, you know, we feel deeply about the pain that war inflicts on people in conflicts everywhere in the world, and of course we said that very, very intentionally, because while, you know, Israel and Gaza might, or Russia and Ukraine may have blown up completely in the world globally, but there are thousands of other people who are suffering in other wars. So you can't, you know, why comment on the one and not on the other? So we're saying whether they play out in the global arena or not. And we do support the ideology of Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And, you know, we hope that all conflicts will be resolved with minimal impact on human life and dignity. We are, however, not a political organization. We don't have political aims. And therefore, we won't make statements about particular conflicts. And then we went on to say, well, our core mission is X, Y, Z. And in this situation, we would like to support our members by, and so in our case, we're providing facilitated training on how our trainers and facilitators can facilitate this kind of conversation. But for a business, for example, they might choose to then ask people to be mindful of each other. And again, they might choose to have a session with a very experienced, and this can't be said enough, very experienced facilitator who can hold space for all of the emotions that are bound to be going around in companies at the moment.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing, because it's actually a topic that is very hot at the moment, and a lot of companies that they are going through that, because we have, now our world is all mixed. We have customers from every part and colleagues from every part. So thank you for sharing that. Let's move to something a little bit happier, because I believe here we have a lot of expats and migrants, So what happened then is, well, how can we talk about the corporate world, and now we can talk about ourselves when we go to different countries, probably because of work. In your experience, again, because you told us all your 6 countries, how you were moving from one culture to another, what are the most difficult challenges that expats can experience? So if we decide to go to a different country with different cultures, what is the most difficult challenges?
Right. That's it. So let's just look at anyone who's moved around countries and put your hand up if it was really easy for you right at the beginning. Oh, I'm not seeing any hands. Okay. That's also right. Okay. So, the interesting thing is, I don't know how many years you've each been living outside of your own countries, but the interesting thing is that after a while you forget, right? You forget the things that were a challenge for you, right, at the beginning. So
yeah, I didn't put my hand up, Claire, sorry, because I didn't know what was the length, of how many years you were out, or I've been maybe 1 or 2 years, so I don't know if that is considered as.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, a week is sometimes you're already you're frustrated. But tell us about you, Oliver. Where did you move from and to?
Oh, I went around Australia and around, Southeast Asia a little bit, and then back, but not in home, but kept on moving. So around Europe, and that's my travels here, working here and there. And I suppose I think it depends on personalities as well. I think you have
Absolutely.
that expat, and you have the process of living out of your home or your country. There's a process of not grief, but it's similar. Yeah, you leave, then you are in a new place, new people, new costumes, new language, new codes. So yeah, you need a bit of adaptation, that's for sure. Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
make out from your accent where you're from. Where are you from?
No, I'm in Barcelona. I'm in Spain, but I'm half British, and I don't know. Where did you think I was from?
From somewhere in between countries.
Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah,
it.
it was a mix. Okay, well, exactly what you've said. Let me, I've done a few funny faces here, so let me share them with you. So this is kind of, hey, you're at home, you're nice, you're comfortable, and then all of a sudden you want to go to a new country, and hopefully you're excited about it, and you're not quite sure at the same time. So, I say hopefully because you also hear about people who keep being sent out on all sorts of missions all around the world, and they're tired of moving around. Or maybe it's your partner who's having to move around with you, and the partner is not happy about moving around, right? Aoife, have you been living in Germany all your life? Or I know you're mixed, very mixed in your cultures, but
Okay, so I was born in Spain, but I was only 3 months old when I moved to Germany. And since then, I haven't moved out of Germany. I now live in a different place than where I grew up in Germany, but I've stayed here. Yeah. But hopefully I will leave.
Right. Maybe even just moving to a different place also has sometimes its cultural adaptation phases as well in the same country.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a big difference in cultures inside of Germany, which can be totally different even from the way they speak. Yeah, so there is quite a lot of differences there.
Yeah, right. Okay, so so here we are. We're moving somewhere new, and this doesn't have to happen in the order I'm showing it at all. But part of the experience of moving somewhere new is, yay, I'm somewhere new. I came to Holland. Look at all the bicycles, look at all the tulips. Look how nice the buildings are. Look all that. You got this kind of honeymoon period, and after that honeymoon period, you then kind of have these moments of total confusion. So when we were trying, for example, to sign up in the local council, they wanted us to bring a certain paper, and we brought a certain paper, but then somebody else said you have to go to another council building, and another council building said, no, this wasn't the paper you wanted. And it was like so confusing to us. Why do you do what you do? Why don't you do it in the way I'm used to back home? That made so much more sense, right? Did any of you have any confusion moments?
Come to Germany. They love all the paperwork.
The paperwork, right. And anything else? Confusion?
I find
One at a time, David?
Yes, well, I've worked in 22 different countries, and I've lived in about 5 or 6 for about a year. And most of my ambition is not to spend time with the people from my own country. So I make a lot of effort to do that. And here in Spain, I spend more time with expats than anywhere else. I think it might be to do with old age, who knows. However, the thing that usually gets me is the processes. They're always different. Now, a simple example I have is in Valencia, we have a travel card, and it would work sometimes and not others. And it took me a while to realise that on the same travel card, there are two different accounts, one for the buses and one for the trams. No one ever told me that. And it's not something, even if I'm expecting it, I would never have guessed that much. And it happens all the time, everywhere you go. And in Spain, each place is different, as it is everywhere else in the world.
Oh, God. Yeah, exactly. You get these
Yeah,
little
you
things that
have the same experience, Ian, because Ian wanted to make a comment and wonder what is the same experience in Spain.
So I would say I had my, as you have it on the screen here, the honeymoon period when I came to Spain. I apart from the weird times that people eat and then go out in the evening to socialize, I fitted in pretty well until I got married, and
With
then
Spanish
you
woman?
suddenly realize, yeah, because of course,
Then he had the honeymoon period. Right, yes. Okay.
yes. But my wife is Catalan. Her parents are Spanish, and that's when I discovered that really I'd spent 10 years living in Spain without actually having any serious interaction with Spanish people. It was all fairly superficial socializing, shall we say. And of course, a lot of my friends were expats from various countries. And then you suddenly discover that as you say, the values and the behaviors of hardcore Spanish people are very, very different from at least from my English family side.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what you appreciate, what you don't appreciate. Yeah, it can be pretty intense when when you actually start getting into the culture.
Absolutely.
So thank you for sharing all of that. So this confusion can sometimes lead to frustration because, again, why don't people do things my way? I don't understand what you're doing. But then after a while, and I'm kind of expecting, I don't know, Ian, are you still married?
Yes, amazingly
Okay.
enough. Yes. Yes.
So after a while, hopefully, you get some understanding of what it's all about, right?
To
And
be
from
honest,
the
the problem is not so much with my wife; it's with my in-laws that their values and behaviors are totally alien to me. But anyway, yes.
we'll book you into a marriage
Mother-in-law-
counseling session.
Mother-in-law is a kind of different kind of culture again, okay? Let's
Yes.
what?
Your letter not against you. So the thing is that once you start understanding a little bit, then you start adjusting. Now, whether you know you've adjusted or not, you do start adjusting, because if you don't adjust, you won't, you'll be unhappy the whole time, right? So that's as far as kind of the practicalities. But we also have, and that is something that I certainly experienced, funnily enough, when I came to Holland, is social isolation. Now, for example, in Holland, people they're very nice people, but when it comes to inviting people to their homes, it either doesn't happen at the beginning. It certainly doesn't. You really need to work hard before you form the kind of a friendship where people invite you into their homes or into their lives. So social isolation, I mean, I even remember, like, I think I came here, I worked for Nike for a while, so there were expats, it was fine, we were socializing. But then when I left Nike and I started working for a Dutch company, I remember a year down the line, in my New Year's resolutions, I actually said something like, make 3 new friends. It was like that. It was difficult. It was like, really, from a Dutch point of view, it was difficult. And when I first came here, I remember the first few months, where my husband was working and I wasn't. And I was feeling so lonely. And this was before internet times. And in the supermarket, I came across this English woman. And she talked to me, and I said, "Oh, wow, the English." And I'm talking to her, and I was like, seventh heaven. She said, "Well, have a cup of coffee." And on the appointed day, I went to the cafe and I sat there and I waited and I waited and I waited, and she didn't show up. And it's still, when I think about it, I think how ridiculously sad it was at that moment that I felt so devastated that this one woman didn't show up, So that can happen to you, especially if you're not going to multicultural areas of a country, which is where we were. You could feel quite isolated, but luckily you then have your social interactions, you start working, you start meeting people, and then you adjust again, hopefully. So the other thing that happens as time goes on is that through this adjustment, you're learning new ideas, new behaviors, new expectations. You might even be building new values. And but that doesn't mean that you've totally forgotten everything that you brought from home. But these two can either live alongside each other, or they can clash. You might at some point think, who am I? I don't belong here and I don't belong there. Or you might think, hey, wonderful, I belong here and I belong there. So just show of hands, how many of you belong in two places now?
We all.
Okay, excellent. So I would expect that means you've all adjusted quite well. Excellent.
We are nearly on time, so it would be nice if you can wrap up a little bit. And I believe Eva wanted to say something.
Yeah, I unfortunately have to leave because I have another thing that I have to do, even I have to plan at the university right now. So thank you so much for all the information. Coming. I really enjoyed it. I really learned a couple of new things as well. So thank you very much. And I hope you have a great time, everyone, as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Lovely to meet you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so with respect to the whole time, just one more minute. I would like to ask you, first of all, thank you very much for the super interesting, information. But what message would you like to leave the audience with before we're going to close down?
Well, obviously, for when it comes to businesses, which is what we're talking about now, it's interesting that a lot of leaders and managers actually underestimate the intercultural problems that can arise and the misunderstandings that can arise. So I would certainly highly recommend that businesses that are international or multicultural to take the time to learn about the other cultures that they're working with. And also, as we've seen with the expat, when you have people coming over from other countries, to take good care to understand that they're not in their own place, to help them out, to have maybe relocation advisors, and also about their partners. Their partners can also be feeling out of place. And if the partners, if the wife ain't happy or the husband ain't happy, the partner ain't happy. So, so it's important. It's important to take everything about culture into account to run a good business.
Yeah, thank you very much for all the advice and for all the tips and techniques and tools that you show us. Please, when is your book coming out?
Well, hopefully tomorrow, and if not next week. Yeah.
Okay, so
on Amazon.
Put the link into the chat if you know, or a picture. Saying that, I have to say to everybody, thank you very much to all of you for joining us on the DG.Talks show. I truly hope that you have enjoyed our session and taken away some valuable insights. And remember, each conversation is a chance to learn and to grow. So mark your calendars for our next event on the 18th of January. I'm going to send in the chat so you may recognize someone here. So maybe you recognize that person, yeah? Because our next event is going to be on the 18th of January. And we will have an incredible opportunity to welcome Oliver, which you can see him here, who will guide us through an exploration of music and rhythm and how these elements can foster a healthier and more connected work culture. So if you want to know, he's amazing. He has a lot of great energy. If you see him in action, wow, it blows your minds. It really gives you enough of energy. So
do we have to pay for it this time?
You don't pay. You actually give a donation if you want. So it's up to you if you want to donate for the administration of an student that is organizing the whole event. It's up to you.
That sounds great. One
Yeah.
question, Claire. What is the title of your book?
Cross-cultural misunderstanding. I can just very
Please type it in
quickly.
the chat for everybody to have it, because I think it
thank
will
you.
be really amazing. Because you already gave us a lot of tips and techniques of how we can benefit from intercultural communication. So as your host, it's my mission to bring
Thank
you
you.
the finest speakers and to create an unmatched show experience. So your suggestions are always welcome. So if you have any suggestions of any kind of speakers that you would like to hear and to meet, please let me know, and I will strive to incorporate them into our future lineups. Okay. Apologies for overtime, but it was well worth it. And I want you to do one thing before I say goodbye. I want you to write one thing for yourself that you have learned today and that you will be able to apply it straight away. Just think for a second. Write it down for yourself.
Or better still, share it in the chat.
Yeah, it would have been better. But let's leave it like that. Now I want to all wishing you. Oh wow, cool! Thank you, Oliver and David. Awareness of differences, absolutely. So thank you. So I want to say, wishing you all an amazing rest of the day. Stay inspired, stay connected, and remember, every dialogue on DG.Talks is a step towards a better world. So see you next time on the 18th of January, where we will be inspired, this time with some music by Oliver. So wishing
Yay.
you a wonderful, wonderful day. Take
Thank
care.
you, dear
everyone.
Leta.
Thank you very much, Loretta, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All
Good
right.
night, David.
You, Jen, Happy New Year.
But by the way, yeah, touch the hats. Look, tomorrow is the 1st of December.
Yay! The first chocolates of the Advent calendar. Okay, well,
Nice.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, everyone.
See you.
Same.
Bye bye. Same.